guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, "Don't Park in My Driveway." So, when we first moved to Texas, our house was behind a pasture. As the years went on, the pasture became schools. Every weekend there was some kind of event or sport, something going on at one of the two schools, and there was never enough parking, so of course people parked in our neighborhood. This is the story of Mr. Red Pickup, MRP. Well, MRP loves to park in our driveway. I don't know why. Maybe he liked the white brick of the house, or that it was near the corner, I don't know. But he loved to park in our driveway every weekend, and I don't mean politely. I mean he's park in the dead center like those a-holes who park over the line. Well, my parents would leave notes on his car for a few weeks till one week we found a letter taped to our door. "Hi, this is MRP, please stop leaving these notes on my truck or I will have to phone the police for harassment. My kid has his sporting events and there's never parking. It's not hurting you to let me park here, so just leave me alone." Well, you can imagine how fast my parents called the cops, and once they explained and showed the time-stamped pics of every time he'd parked there, he was towed. And as an added dose of sweet karma, the tow truck pulled off with his car just as he was rounding the corner to my house. He got to watch his car roll away. Karma was issued, as well as a trespassing and harassment tickets. He turned as red as his truck. At least his kid won his race. The next story is titled, "Kid Put Stuff in Yard. Ran Over It with Mower. Mother Wants Me to Pay." So, my yard goes pretty close to the neighbor's concrete pad where they have a basketball court set up. Neighborhood kids always go there to play and usually leave their bikes and things on my grass. It's not that big of a deal, except I have had to ask them to move their stuff several times when I'm mowing. This is the first time I've mowed this year and the grass is a few inches higher than it should be. Anyway, a kid comes over and I'm mowing, but he still puts the basketball he brought with him down in my grass. I get to the basketball and just decide I can nudge it with the front of the mower and out of the way. I made eye contact with the kid several times waiting for him to move it before I got there, and he never did, so I figured, whatever, it'll roll. Well, I bump it with my mower over to a section of mower grass, and as I continue forward past where it was, there was a loud clunking and crackling like I'd just run over a rock. The rock turned out to be his iPhone. He was upset, obviously, that his phone was broken, and I did feel bad. But my thought was that he should have said something or moved it before I got there. He goes home, and about 30 minutes later his mom shows up and tells me I broke it and am responsible for replacing it, that I should have told him to move his stuff because I am the adult. I tell her I'm sorry about the phone and politely decline her request. She just says, "I promise you will be paying for it," and then storms off. I'm not really sure what her next course of action is or what she plans to do. She mentioned something about she has a friend that's a lawyer, so I guess she could take me to civil court. Am I legally responsible for replacing the phone? Would it be cheaper than court costs if she did choose to take me to court? Update. Brief summary of what happened. Neighborhood kid left his phone in my grass while I was mowing, and I mowed it by mistake. The mother got upset and demanded I pay for it. Well, she, mother, and son showed up at my door around noon and apologized. She said that she misunderstood what happened and thought that I'd done it on purpose to teach her son a lesson about leaving his stuff in my yard. I guess he explained to her it was his fault, which I thought was commendable for someone his age. She told me that she just stressed about it because she is a single mother and doesn't really have the means to replace it at the moment, and that if it was anything else she probably wouldn't have gotten so upset, but he likes hanging out with other kids and that's how she keeps track of him. I told her about my spare phone, iPhone 7, his was a 6S. I also took the advice of some of the commenters that it might be damaging to just give it to him and that I should perhaps have him work for it. I have a detached garage and have been needing to clean it, and told her if he wanted to help me, I'd give him the phone. He instantly looked excited. I imagine he felt like he'd never get a new phone, and she acted very grateful and said he could help. Left and came back an hour later, just the son this time, and we got started cleaning. Took about 4 hours, a lot of work but nothing too hard, he's just 12. I had a couple cords of firewood I wanted moved out and stacked into a rack, and then a bunch of boxes I cut up and had him bag and carry to the curb. He swept, had a Coke and a couple slices of pizza, then got his phone. I had a talk with him about paying attention to where his things are because it won't always work out like this. I also told him if he wants to mow my yard every weekend and his mom says he can, I'll pay him $30 a week. It will probably take him a couple hours. He again acted excited at the thought of making money, and when I asked him what he'd spend it on, he said games. We figured out new games would be about $60 and worked it out that I'd pay him $20 for 3 weeks, then $65 on the 4th week, so he could cover tax because it might be hard for him to save. The 4th week he will do an extra little chore to cover the $5, like sweep off the porch or walkway. I hope I've done the right thing and didn't make him think that everything just works out, but I did my best to have him earn it. And hopefully showed an equal measure of kindness that he will carry with him. I also didn't want the mother to stress over replacing the phone, as my mom was also a single mother and I know how tough it can be. My own son is just 2, so it was my first real opportunity to pass on some fatherly wisdom, which I hope is what I did. The next story is titled, "My entitled live-in landlord tried pressuring me to pay for damages I never made." I normally meet great people throughout my life, but it sure takes a curveball when you finally meet an entitled person. After all the unbelievable stories you encounter of them, it was hard to believe they actually exist. After the COVID lockdowns last year commenced and for various reasons, I had to find some place to move to around my work area temporarily. After searching online, I found a room available with a live-in landlord, who we'll call Mark. Mark seemed friendly and the apartment he had was small, comfortable and somewhat clean. I was desperate to find a roof over my head and quickly agreed to his offer to let this room for a minimum of 6 months, and I paid a deposit. The room was good, a few scuffs and scratches here and there, but I wasn't the first tenant of his, so this was totally expected and didn't bother me. There was no inventory of the room's condition, and I didn't feel the need to take note as the whole process had been rather casual. Pro tip: always take an inventory of everything in a place you move into. After the first week, I began to realize how this guy truly lived like. I'm generally a clean person and clean up any mess I make or dishes I use immediately out of respect for anyone else living there, and to some regard I expect the same from others, within reason of course. I realized I found myself cleaning up after Mark every day, and he would just leave dishes on the counter to eventually be cleaned the following week. At one point, every single plate and utensil had been used and left on the counter as he began using paper plates instead. I learnt that Mark was used to having others clean up for him through a maid, which stopped when I moved in. The place quickly turned dirty, smelled, and he would do loud things at all times of day, such as blasting the TV volume, shouting down the phone and slamming doors at 6 a.m. With these things and long laundry list of other reasons I could go over if someone's curious, after 1 month I already wanted to leave and asked him if he would be willing to terminate the minimum lease early. Mark refused. So, I was stuck there for 5 months enduring his behavior when I began searching for a new place to stay. He apparently began advertising the room online and there was a visitor coming to see it. I made sure to clean and tidy everything I could for this visitor. I had work that day, so I left the room open for Mark. I came back that evening and Mark approached me saying we needed to talk. He said the viewer liked the room but was unhappy with the damage to the walls and the smallest of marks on the wardrobe, damage I'm convinced was there when I entered, and that I would need to pay for replacements and a repainting of the whole room at an extortionate price, all of which would have actually been covered under fair wear and tear in our country's rental laws that I didn't know at the time. He also pointed out that the corkboard I had mounted to the wall would further damage the paint and plastering when removed. I had used the same board in my previous rental and said it would be okay to remove as I was using wall-safe adhesives before showing him remove it there and then. It only goes and rips out a small chunk of plaster as I do so. Okay, fine, I said, not wanting further trouble. I messed up there, I'll pay for the damages you stated, which realistically would have cost about $50, but he had demanded $400. When I brought this up, he said yeah, but I want it done perfectly and that's the best I can find. Mark would never do any work himself and would always hire someone to do it, such as simple things like assembling furniture, and as such wouldn't let me do the replastering myself. I knew he could pull that money from the deposit I gave, and honestly, I really didn't want to go into that kind of legal trouble, so I simply said I'll pay the amount and made him agree for me to fix this wardrobe myself, as it just involved replacing a part. The following week, I noticed he had decided to get his kitchen redecorated, despite how he was saying how he short on cash he was at the time. No smoking gun, but I couldn't help but feel he intended to use my money to do his kitchen instead. The day of my move out comes and a friend offers to help me. Initially I thought I didn't need to, but eventually agreed. With the thought of having a witness present, I could no longer trust Mark. After clearing out the room, we carefully cleaned and inspected everything. After all, I was now suspicious of any further accusations from him. I made Mark inspect the room and he spent about just 30 whole seconds looking around before saying, "Okay, that's fine, I'll return your deposit tonight." Sure enough, I leave, and the deposit comes through. Great. Only 2 days go by when I get a horrible text from Mark saying how much of a bad housemate I was and that he demanded another $600 for damages, before sending photos of scratches I had never seen before. Puzzled, I reply, "I'm sorry Mark, but I have never seen these scratches before, but you inspected the room with me and a witness present and none of us had noticed any damage. You even returned my deposit, so I'm afraid I cannot help you with this, especially as there is no inventory. Best of luck with your new tenant." Mark responded with several more rude messages saying how I had to pay him as I was using that room before, cursing and then trying to guilt trip me into paying. The exact messages are still on my phone, but I really don't want to open them up. I eventually had enough of this all and blocked his number. I apologize that this story was long and probably not as interesting as the other stories here, but this was just an experience I've mostly kept to myself until this post. I live alone now in a great apartment and my present landlady is such a sweet and caring person. The last story is titled, "My New Neighbors Called the Police on Me." I bought a piece of land that had been vacant for 10 years. I have only had the property for about 2 months, and I've been over there a handful of times. I had several different interactions with neighbors. Most had no idea it was for sale. Some of the neighbors were nice, some were belligerent. I still have to meet a few, but I'm not sure and emotionally prepared for that yet. The earliest appointment for my survey is October. So, here's the rub. I was on my property a few days ago and I noticed things had changed. My family had built a fort out of sticks and logs and that was destroyed. And I have things of mine that were thrown into the woods or missing. Debris was strewn to block paths. The previous owner left a lot of garbage that I have to clean up. I was cutting trees and the neighbors called the police. The police asked me to prove I owned it, and they told me that the neighbors had reported squatters and a teepee, kids' fort, that was torn down. I have yet to put up no trespassing signs, but I will the next time I go there. The officers said they had so many calls that it has made it to the police chief's desk. One of the neighbors that called told the police that I was staring into her yard, and I planted trees onto her yard, and she ripped them out. Backstory there was that I was there a week earlier with my dad planting trees. The neighbor starts yelling at us and we start talking to her about how I bought the property. She calmed down and we asked her to show us the property line and she said it was around a tree. My woods are full of trees. She couldn't clearly give me a border. So, we offered to dig the trees back up and move them and she said it was fine and they looked nice. Fast forward. She ripped out about $300 worth of trees without any clear indication of a property line. So now my stuff is being destroyed and torn down, and I don't feel safe. I want to file a police report for trespassing and destruction of property. Can I file on behalf of my trees since the woman couldn't indicate a property line? Should I call the department and ask for the police chief to speak with him, or call and talk to one of the responding officers? What should I say and what are my options? Any help is appreciated. Update. I posted about a month ago about having issues with neighbors and something happened yesterday. So I figured, I should update. Sorry, I went over with my brother and my father to mow the property that I bought, and we got it mowed. I brought no trespassing signs with me that I was going to put well into the woods so she would have no right to rip them down. We put the signs up and we heard a gunshot. Same lady that I ripped my trees out previously. She yelled at us, "Who's out there?" And I yelled, "The owner of the property." She yelled, "What do you have in your hands?" It was nails and a hammer and no trespassing signs, but at this point screw this lady firing a rifle. So, I yelled back, "None of your business." My dad yelled that he was calling the police and we walked away where it was safer, and we heard another gunshot. We waited off-site for the police and returned when they showed up. We walked back there, and the police walked into her yard and my dad and the rest of us followed to get this solved. The woman that fired the gun said nobody fired a gun. And we said we heard a gun twice and she had a rifle in her hand when we saw her. She said that we had trespassed on her property on multiple occasions and were peeking through the woods at her grandchild. She said we could have been child traffickers. We were squatters from one town over and the local PD never got back to her about the squatters. They said there were potentially bears nearby. She said, "Well, when someone of the opposite color walked through the woods." This lady tried to make anything stick. At one point we told her before that we had talked with her and told her we owned it, but she said that she didn't know that that was true. Another officer who had been there last time said that he told her last time that we owned it. And she said she didn't know if that was true or not, to the cop. The cops told her she handled it wrong. We exchanged numbers and walked away with the officers. We talked to them before we left. I asked one of the officers when is it considered harassment, and he said that though they were right in what they did even though they handled it wrong, and they're really stuck in their ways. Which didn't help. The officers told us to try and stay away from that side of the property and build a fence once it's surveyed. Fast forward to today and I get a call from the PD code enforcement. He says the neighbors feel threatened and I can't be trespassing on their property anymore. I said I haven't been. He said they have every right to feel threatened and he told them to call PD every time I'm back in the woods on my property. He tried telling me that I couldn't go back into my woods anymore and I asked him what rights I had on the land I owned. He just kept telling me that I was in the wrong and to make sure to tell my dad too to stop. I told him I was having it surveyed and he told me that that was fine, but to stop trespassing. My dad and I are going up to the PD today to get copies of police reports and clear some things up. I honestly am so distraught and disheartened at this point I don't even know if I want this property anymore. Thanks for listening.